Star Trek Triple Feature number 2, we're diving into Deep Space Nine, The Prophets Be Praised. Deep Space Nine has turned out to be my favorite Trek series in this venture. I just love that everyone's an underdog, the rules are bent, and not everything is so black and white. The overarching story was smartly written, and the heavy focus on character development really appealed to me. When it went dark, it went hard, but that doesn't mean there wasn't still humor and heart to it. And when they wanted to really go for the laughs, the Ferengi were their go-to guys. And today's episode has got Ferengis out the wazoo. When I tweeted about watching DS9, people were extremely vocal with their thoughts, and the #1 episode to get brought up was Prophet and Lace. Unprompted, I received a dictionary's worth of warnings telling me I was in for a bad ride. Naturally, this made me really look forward to seeing this one, because if there's one thing I love, it's a good show failing so epically it turns around and becomes funny. If it's gone into legend as one of the worst, it's gotta be one of the best. So I feel like this one probably needs a little bit of a warning. The plot is Quark gets a sex change. So, you know, if anything pertaining to that seems like it'll read offensive to you, here's your heads up. We start things off at Quark's bar, where he is uncharacteristically praising one of his employees for her solid work. As A, this is Quark, and B, he's talking to a woman, you know something's up. Sure enough, it turns out it's a ploy to get her to give him weird, ear-related sexual favors in exchange for keeping her job. Make no mistake, Quark is a misogynistic little troll. It might be Star Trek's utopian future, but sexual harassment in the workplace is still a hot topic. It isn't long before Rom shows up, stating he can't get a hold of their mother or anyone else on Ferenginar. The first thing he assumes is the Dominion must have taken them over, but oh ho, if you think this plot is going to tie into their dramatic space war, then think again. Before you can even say ham and cheese, their mother Ishka and her boyfriend, the Grand Nagus, are docking at the station.
They're alive!
Ferengis are a notoriously sexist, patriarchal race that give women little to no rights, but Ishka is a real leader in changing that. Now that she's stolen the heart of the Grand Nagus, she's shifting Ferengi gender politics one rule of acquisition at a time. Things are so bad on Ferenginar that it's illegal for women to wear clothes. But you can't stop the winds of change when there's broadcast standards and practices to contend with, not to mention it's pretty handy for this episode considering what transpires. Ishka has convinced the Grand Nagus to grant Ferengi women the right to wear clothes. And Quark just about shits a brick of gold-pressed latinum. I find this plot point hilarious, that the women's civil rights revolution on Ferenginar is being led by the mother of Quark, one of the most sexist, traditionalist Ferengis out there. Quark is constantly being shifted toward doing the right thing by forces outside his own control.
Females? A valuable resource?
This is all very well and good, but unfortunately this little bit of legislation blew out the communication grid and resulted in the Nagus being deposed. You win some, you lose some. Fortunately, he's got a plan. And by he, I mean Ishka. And the plan is to call a bunch of Ferengi commissioners to the station and hash this out. If she can convince them Ferengi women are good for their economy, they can get Zek back on the throne.
You remember my son Nog, don't you? He's the first Ferengi to join Starfleet.
I'll try not to hold that against him.
I just love the Nagus. He's such a ridiculous character. This episode is utterly absurd, and nothing is more emblematic of that than this scene transition. Well, the only person they convinced to come is Nilva, chairman of Sluggo Cola, so things aren't off to a great start.
Bring Sluggo Cola, the slimiest cola in the galaxy.
Things take another sharp decline when they're visited by the acting Grand Nagus, their old frenemy Brunt. Acting Grand Nagus is apparently a joke funny enough to be repeated about a dozen times in this episode.
Acting Grand Nagus.
This is what I love about Ferengi plots. The element of danger is so incredibly low. Gee, will Brunt's scheme of the week pan out this time, or will he get the old pie in the face as usual? Quark's stuck between a rock and a hard place. Either he helps the old Nagus and his feminist mother, or allows Brunt to take him to the poorhouse. In the end, he likes Prophet more, but that doesn't mean he doesn't make his opinion clear to Ishka.
You're the worst thing that ever happened to Zek. You're the worst thing that ever happened to me. In fact, you're the worst thing that ever happened to the entire Ferengi Alliance.
Unfortunately, their row doesn't do a whole lot of good for Ishka's heart. Whoopsie doodle. Score 1 for Brunt, I guess.
They see me rolling, they hating, patrolling and trying to catch me riding dirty.
I love he's got like a knockoff giant manservant. You know when Grand Nagus Zek is looking dignified next to you, you're pretty pathetic.
How pitiful.
Well, with Ishka out of commission for a while and no way to get a female Ferengi to the station on time, the boys are hard up for a brilliant Ferengi businesswoman to meet with the chairman of Sluggo Cola.
Drink Sluggo Cola, the slimiest cola in the galaxy.
Unless they make one?
Well, how do I look?
Not great. Here's the point in the story where it's gonna make or break it for you, for obvious reasons. Quark isn't in drag, he has been surgically transitioned into a female, and when a show from the 90s delves into gender identity, things are bound to get a little ishy. Also, the female Ferengi attire is a lot more form-fitting in this episode. Guess you gotta make sure if you're doing a sex change plot that we can see them orbs of the prophets. I'm just imagining their pitch to Bashir over this one. Like, sure they've got a war with the Dominion going on, but I guess you can take the time to help the Ferengis recreate Tootsie. This could be a commentary on how Quark is equally good at business no matter what gender he is, thus proving their point, but instead, I don't know, you know how women be.
Oh!
You look nice.
Nice. That's all. All these facts, figures. They're too much for me to remember.
While being a woman makes him different, they also need to teach him how to be a woman.
Pretty woman, walking down the street, pretty woman, the kind I like to meet, pretty woman.
Poor Nog. He's developed into such a rounded, mature character, and his father and uncle are still getting into stupid plots like this all the time. Anyway, guess who's arrived at the station early?
Drink Sluggo Cola, the slimiest cola in the galaxy.
Man, oh man, oh man, this romantic dinner is sure gonna be awkward.
When it comes to profit, I'm your girl.
Check it out, we could totally spit loogies on them from here. For all of Quark's complaining, he does have a lot of good pitches for Nilva. In fact, he's so good at the sale that Nilva wants to take him back to his bedroom for a little umox.
SpaghettiOs!
Oh, I need you. What you need is a cold shower.
Fun fact, the uniting element between all 3 episodes of this triple feature is apparently rapey overtones. I think the most offensive part of this gag is how predictable it is. When Brunt comes crashing in to out Quark, Quark must go to desperate measures to prove he is who he claims to be. Wow, I know we live in a future where people can use plastic surgery to change their species or gender on a whim, but I guess that's good enough for me. Come on, how did he even open up his jumpsuit like that? There's not even an opening there. This has sufficiently gotten Nilva on their side, which is worrying enough for Brunt to assume he's going to lose his position. I mean, they still gotta, convince a lot of other commissioners that this is a good idea, but whatever, it's pretty much settled by this point. Now Quark is back to his old self, but he's still got some leftover hormones to deal with. You know how women be. Here's my obligatory appearance in this episode. Perhaps I should have stopped this nonsense.
Sometimes he'd get this little glint in his eye. You know what I mean.
Not really. But I'm glad you had a pleasant evening.
Odo's a true ally. He's even willing to give Quark a hug, and he hates his guts.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Looks like Ishka's okay now, and women's rights will continue to be upheld on Ferenginar. That's right, folks, thanks to Quark, sexism is over. In fact, he's so pro-women now, he apologizes to his employee from the opening scene and gives her a raise, which is a shame according to her, because she was really looking forward to giving him some ear jobs. The end. I think I'm probably gonna get some flack for this, but in all honesty, I've seen a lot worse episodes of Deep Space Nine. I can totally see why this is offensive to some people, and this is coming from the perspective of a cisgender woman, but for me personally, I didn't find it as bad as some people say. Quark is intentionally a morally repugnant character, and most of the jokes in this are at his expense. Not because he's become a woman, but because he's Quark. It's his chance to walk a mile in the other half's heels, so to speak. And by the end, he does learn a bit about treating women more respectfully, at least as much as they'll allow for Quark. The episode does have some really questionable jokes about women and some not gay moments, but they do forward female Ferengi rights, and considering other, stronger plots the show has done dealing with women and LGBT issues, I think most of the badness was just a misfire. The episode's biggest crime is that a lot of the jokes simply aren't that funny. There's a lot of misses that just make it awkward, but I do still like Ferengi episodes, so I found the characters fun. They brought back some solid guest stars, and there was the occasional clever bit of dialogue. Your mileage may vary on this one, but I might sit down, crack open a Sluggo Cola, and check this one out again.